This is Gary. He has what is probably the largest collection of miniatures in the world. A collection so vast that we looked at it for hours upon hours and barely looked at the fraction of all the miniatures in his collection.
What in the world?
Share size on this. What's most insane? All of the miniatures are painted by some of the world's best painters ever. A collection valued over $. But there is one thing that Gary does that will change miniature painting forever. So let's talk about one of the most interesting people in the miniatures hobby you've never heard about. So we just flew for 36 hours and just arrived at Gary's mansion. And I am speechless. Almost like an abundance of emotions right now. This collection is insane. I think you've seen a miniature collection and then you come here like...
The swords are all either exact replicas made by the people that made them for the movies. Lord of the Rings ones, there's the Highlander sword.
Oh wow.
I think
share size on this. This whole thing I could spend probably 3 days just looking at pieces. Holy crap. Wow. Just keeps going. This is probably the most iconic Golden Demon piece ever. From Lon Michal Pisarski. This is just legend in a box.
I mean, now you might think, is he standing next to Tom Hiddleston? Because yeah, I freaking am. And then we move here, and we have Mr. Tom Holland. This is so uncanny. And then you move over a bit here. And you have Benedict fucking Cucumberbatch. Cucumberbatch.
In the late 1970s, Gary picked up his first set of miniatures. And Gary seemed to fondly remember that first ever box he ever got.
So it was about 21 at the time. The little ones came with one of the original D&D sets. It just had the blue box. It had like these really crummy plastic dice. We got a few at the time. It'd be minifigs, but they were pretty bad. I mean, it was just like...
In this shelf, we'll find some of the first ever miniatures Gary got to his collection.
People would a lot of times paint their own, so they'd bring over their painted figures. A lot of the original figures are in a case over here. For years, they used the same ones. I mean, they could use these amazing painted figures, but they used the ones they used back in 1980. We still have a number of them over here. My wife actually painted some fairly nice ones, so.
In the late 1970s, Gary and his friends started playing Dungeons and Dragons. And Dungeons and Dragons was his big love for decades. As a matter of fact, Gary is probably running what is the oldest currently active Dungeons and Dragons campaign.
Campaign has gone like 40-some years. 408 adventures, sometimes many weeks per adventure. Okay, that's adventure 250, so, oh, 1980. Not 81, so the old ones were like this.
Every shelf is like packed with... I assume a lot of this is like his personal stuff, so it's like old Dungeons and Dragons stuff and terrain stuff. And this is such a fraction of his collection, and this is just one of the rooms.
So we've had some people, of course, come and go. Well, not too many go. He's just had more people slowly added, but we have a lot of the original players from the early 80s are still around. they've moved to other places and stuff, but we're all of similar age. More of them are retired. It's easy to bring them back.
And he'd do anything to get the coolest miniatures possible he could get for his campaigns, to make the most immersive setups for the sessions that would last them days. But these days, instead of fighting in small dungeons, because of the high level of all of the characters, the games look vastly different. So what's the highest level character in your...
My wife has the only one past 20, who has a 21st level thief. The higher levels, like they're running a castle or doing, it's like, it changes the game a lot. They have a lot of adventures they haven't finished, so.
But Gary didn't become a collector overnight. In the late 80s, Gary formed a company in finance and didn't have nearly as much time for the hobby side as maybe he would have wanted. So most of the time that he spent in the hobby was playing.
That really got me into miniatures, was collecting for the game. I painted some for a while and quickly learned, okay, I'll focus on the game and playing that, and I found a number of people, even back then, that were doing commission work and painting, that started a collection of miniatures.
And while Lucas, me and Maxime was able to check out his collection, let me quickly talk about this week's sponsor, Squarespace. Unless this is the first time you watch a Squidmar video, you know that we love Squarespace. And a cool thing, we've just recently completely updated our website, and it looks so freaking amazing, and all of it is done with the help of Squarespace. They have decades worth of experience making award-winning web templates where you, without any previous knowledge of making websites, can just drag and drop images and text to make it look amazing. On top of that, over the last couple of years, they've mixed that together with AI technology, and now it is easier than ever before to get that website from start to finish and display that one thing that you want to showcase on the internet. Maybe it's your gaming club that needs a cool website. Maybe you have a hobby business where you do painting commissions. Having a website make you seem so much more professional, and it will be easier for you to get new jobs. The best thing of all, making a website through Squarespace is completely free. You can try it out, make that website look awesome, and realize how much you actually need it. And when you do, you head to squarespace.com/Squidmar, enter the code Squidmar, and you get 10% off your website and the domain. What are you waiting for? Get it done. Now let's get back to Gary and his insane collection. One of his biggest loves has always been dragons. And going through his collection, it is quite obvious.
So, yeah, that red one was one of the last things I painted a long time ago. So that's probably 81, 82. And then, like I said, I had already had commissioned painters back then.
However, this doesn't explain how he ended up with over 16,000 painted miniatures by some of the world's best painters. And it certainly still haven't explained how he's going to change miniature painting forever. So, this is where things took a turn towards display models, because someone sent him a link of an entire collection of Pegaso model box arts. And just look at this shelf and witness history, because this is where Gary started collecting large-scale 75mm display models.
And my first thought is, well, how do I use these big guys in my D&D campaign? It's like, okay, if it's like a big Viking, I can use him as a frost giant or something or whatever. It's like no, you don't use these in the game. I said, what am I supposed to do with them? I don't use them in the game. It's like, well, no, they're collect. All right. But then they started showing me these things, and they were just amazingly painted. And so that started with a few, and then it kind of exploded into this. As soon as I decided to get that stuff, I was lucky enough that they were looking to sell a lot of their box art. So that was probably my first big acquisition that really turned it into a collection, was Pegaso Chimera sold me the bulk of their box art, which fills almost 2 cases here. And that was like, okay, I guess I'm now a collector.
And after that, Gary kind of went nuts. Started getting deep into the miniature painting hobby for real, learning about all the artists and looking up all of the different minis. And of course, collecting his favorites.
And from then, he just started finding names, and I played between putty and paint and cool mini or not, I would just actually reach out to people. Some would respond back, some I'd never hear from. Just the traditional sources, even eBay, establish a relationship.
And this collection is just truly mental. After a few years, he's pretty much filled out his entire mansion, meaning everything. Tables, shelves, kitchen stove, well, you'll find miniatures everywhere in his house. And he hasn't stopped collecting. He realized that he needed a new way to display all of his miniatures that wasn't in his own home.
We were looking at a kind of pivotal moment in getting a very large house. I had a plan for, because we had our gamers over all the time, very large section of the house would be in this big gaming room with it to store a lot of the figures and everything. And I just started thinking, you know, only so many people can come over. It'd be much better if we just do something where everybody can see it.
And we understand where Gary comes from, because we would wander around the collection for hours, finding new gems wherever we'd look because we had missed something.
And I looked at a few properties, and then right about the same time, a very opportune building came available that wasn't far from our house. It had been in some bankruptcy thing for a number of years, just sitting there empty. All of a sudden, it had a for sale sign. So a few days later, we owned the building, and it was like, okay, we're going to the museum. It's like, all right.
And with that, Gary purchased 2 buildings that would now be his new museum, with over 2,000 square meters of display area or 20,000 square freedom units, to make his dream of displaying his collection come true.
The mission really is to bring it to be appreciated as true art. I mean, it is for games, and that's where a lot of people come from, but they go beyond that point. I was very surprised when I opened the museum. Okay, I said, well, I'll go look at the other museums for help to see how it's done, only to find it just hasn't been done.
And I think this is where Gary is going to change the miniature hobby forever, because this will be the first publicly available miniatures museum. But that is not all. Honestly, this is just one of the things. There is something that comes with that maybe some of you haven't thought about. Gary is now also contributing, making sure that some of these artists around the world can make a decent living from their art, putting their full focus into making the best possible miniatures and pushing the boundaries forward of what is miniature art. Because normally a miniature painter that has to have a different job might not be able to spend 300-400 hours on a piece to make it as good as possible. But thanks to Gary paying a more than fair price for the miniature pieces that he's purchasing to his collection, he makes sure that the industry thrives and can continue thriving for many years. This is not something that Gary would admit to himself. This is actually things that I have heard from artists selling their pieces to him. Honestly, quite similar to what patrons in France and Italy would do to make sure that the best artists in the world would have some place to stay, eat, and make a little bit of money. Gary is now that person in the miniature painting hobby. In this museum, they will also build what is probably going to be one of the biggest fantasy dioramas ever.
It's about 3,000 square feet. I think you've seen the space. I can ask you what you thought of it.
It's gonna be really cool.
You saw it's actually a large L. One whole, the outside whole lane is going to be a number of cities. Similar to Minas Tirith, sort of a towering city in the corner. We have a special spot in the ceiling so we can make some tall structures. So it'll be a number of cities, jungle settings, docks, bays, a pyramid, a desert. I mean, every kind of terrain possible, just slowly morphing several cities. Classic sort of D&D 28 scale terrain, all the way stretching up to the other corner. This also has a high ceiling with a very tall mountain that'll be sliced in half, and it'll have levels of dungeons to see. So it's a lot, but I think you've seen around. We actually have 150 some buildings and stuff already. We have a number of castles. We have the vampire castle. We have a good head start, but it's going to be a lot.
Despite having these lofty dreams, when I asked him what his dream goal was, he had quite a simple answer.
It would be to get it open. I was like,
but there is one thing we need to get to the core of. Which miniature is his favorite in his collection? And which one would he grab if his house is set on fire?
I'd pick a fire extinguisher and put the fire out.
That's the wrong answer.
They're too fragile. I would run and scoop them up, and I would like destroy like 20 of them, and then the fire wouldn't happen, and I'd be sorry I tried to run. I don't know.
But after walking around in his studio and him explaining more about his minis, he did mention that there was 2 pieces in his wine cellar that used to be the highest graded ones on putty and paint that maybe he'd grab if his house was on fire. Still to this day, with the museum, there's a lot to be done. Just to give you a sense of how much work would be involved to get this into the museum, they've done some, rough estimates of how much time it would take them to sort out all the minis, add name tags to them, and it would be a full year for one person if they would be working 140 hours every week. So it will probably take 3-4 people and a full year, if we calculate it more reasonably, to add all of this to the museum. Thankfully, the museum is fully built. What they're now waiting for is for the fire department to approve all of the fire safety stuff in the building. And personally, I must say, out of the Vegas trip, when we got to see a ton of cool stuff, meet a ton of cool people, visit a Vegas Golden Knights game, go to Death Valley, just seeing Gary's collection is the one thing that I'm probably going to take with me for the rest of my life. And that is despite not being able to see everything because it wasn't sorted and everything is tightly crammed on tables. I, for one, cannot wait for this to be displayed for everyone. If it's a year, 2 years from now, I guess we'll find out. Keep your eyes peeled, or as Gary would say,
Discord is where it really is turning into an active community where they sit and discuss, they show their new works. It has really turned into a great hub of artists. We have about 850 members or so now. It's such a good place for a community, so that's the museum community. I mean, top artists of the world are all hanging out there. That's one of the things, and of course the museum itself once we get it open.
It will, of course, be linked down below. A massive thanks to this week's sponsor and, of course, all of our wonderful Patreon that every month help us be able to do what we do for a living. Especially the top donors. If you want to learn to paint like Lucas and I do, go check out the paint set and the airbrush on our web shop. All of which, of course, is linked down below. With that said though, have a great day. Bye.